Okay.
Hello, everyone. Welcome, welcome to the one of the first rounds of the Sneak Attack Invitational.
Yeah. So this is Invitational Star Tournament hosted by Sneak Attack with some of the top players in the UK going at it in a double elimination style tournament to see who is actually who. To sort of prepare a little bit for the world format and just to see who's the best really.
Yeah, it's going to be an interesting tournament. We've got some big names in here. This game is going to be between Scott Simmons and Joe Bernard. So two very well-known UK players. Both have done extremely well this season. Playing a matchup we've seen for a while. For the past 6 months, we've seen a fair bit of this matchup. We've got Zoroark on Scott's side against Buzzrock on Joe's side. So it'll be interesting to see which Lycanroc deck is triumphant here. I think in general it's probably slightly favoured for the Buzzrock side, but hopefully we'll see whether Scott has anything spicy up his sleeve to try and swing that back into his favour.
Yeah, this kind of matchup going into it, it's very much sort of not, even though it's testing for the world format, this is very much like you said, Jack, a matchup we could very easily see before the world format, given that these are two sort of very well established decks already.
Yeah.
Now, so just to let you guys know, watching what we're gonna do here. So we're not going to keep switching sides as the turns sort of go against each other. We're going to sort of stick for one game, one player's perspective entirely. Then we're going to switch over, and then we're going to switch back. So we figured that this way might be better, just to give you insight as from a one-sided way what the mentality might be for one player going into the matchup, approaching what the opponent has, given that they won't have knowledge of the opponent's hand. So we're sort of along with that ride.
Yeah. So we're sticking with Zoroark this time. It seems that Scott has led his Mew EX, which is often one of the bigger cards in the matchup, to try and swing that weakness back into your favour. So it's unfortunate he's had to start it because maybe he wanted to save that to a little bit later on in the game where he could perhaps get a surprise knockout. But that's the way Pokemon goes. He does indeed, as we can see, have a Bridget in hand though, which is pretty much the main thing Zoroark wants to do on turn one. You want to get a Bridget, you want to start getting your Zoruas and your Rockruffs down in this deck. He's got energy as well, which is another really, really important thing to be doing turn one. You want to see if you can net a energy onto a Rockruff, because from there you open up a lot of doors. And he's then also got an Ultra Ball, so he does have access to another supporter next turn. He's not completely stranded with just this Bridget.
Yeah, Scott's hand is very much stacked right now. He's got pretty much everything he needs for a very good turn one. And it is like you were saying, Jack, starting with the Mew, although obviously it's a great attacker against Buzzwole Lycanroc, it's not something you really want to start with because it's very fragile at that 120 HP and is very, very easily KO'd by Buzzwole GX before the Mew has a chance to really put in the work. And of course, being an EX, it does give up 2 prize cards, so really not ideal there. And I don't think that it will be very easy for Scott to get it out of the active right now either. I mean, like you said, he got the Bridges. That's really great for him. He's going to probably use that to grab a couple more Zoras and a Rockruff. Probably attach a Fighting Energy, or the Strong Energy in his hands to the Rockruff after he does so. But that Mew is probably not very long for this world. Although if it does survive, we could see a very cool play with it next turn, perhaps even KOing the Buzzwole on Joe's bench.
Yeah, definitely. I do like that Scott's making sure knows what's in his deck, knows what resources he's got access to. Like you say, I think it's likely that this Mew stays in the active because I think it's more important to get an energy on a Rockruff. Yes, this could mean that the Mew goes down pretty quickly, but I think Lycanroc is still a really, really strong attacker in this deck. So I think personally, I can see the argument for attaching the energy to the Rockruff rather than trying to retreat it out, which is indeed what he does, and saves the rest of his hand to probably Ultra Ball for a Lele for some more steam next turn.
Yeah, now let's see how Joe responds here. It will be very interesting if Voice to go forward. It looks like he's got himself a second energy, and he's just attached to that to Rockruff and ball straight away, announces Bloodthirsty Eyes, and uses that ability to bring up the Rockruff, recognizing how big of a threat it is. Could we just be seeing Joe Dangerous Rogue this Rockruff?
That would be pretty big, but I think it is the most threatening on Scott's side of the board right now. It's the only way he can actually one-shot that Lycanroc next turn. Currently, there's nothing really that Mew can copy from the current board state that would mean that Lycanroc is in imminent danger, so I can see why he's targeting the Rockruff. Dangerous Roguing could be considered maybe a little bit of an overstretch, but like I say, it's the biggest threat right now. you don't really need to Dangerous Rogue GX anything else in this deck because everything is either weak to fighting or has 120 HP, i.e. the Mew. The best thing to Dangerous Rogue probably is an actual Lycanroc, but if he gets rid of the Rockruff, maybe it means that Scott can't even get a Lycanroc down, so maybe you sort of not necessarily waste your GX attack, but use it slightly prematurely just to guarantee that you don't have to find it in the later stages of the game. There's still 3 Zoro down here, sorry. So still 3 Zoro down here, so I can still see him being in a good position, even if he does go for the Dangerous Rogue.
But it's a very important thing to bear in mind because a lot of the times if you're playing a deck or if you're in an opportunity like in a situation like this, you might think to yourself, I don't want to use my GX attack to do a massive, overstretch attack to KO something so weak like a Rockruff. But like you said, Jack, the Rockruff is the biggest threat to Joe right now. And even if he does use it here, it's not like any of the rest of the attacks in his deck that aren't the GX attacks can't deal with the remainder of Scott's stuff anyway. So absolutely correct to use a GX attack here. That is indeed what Joe does. And he will be taking a knockout on this Rockruff and picking up the first prize card of the game.
Yeah, definitely a really, really strong play. I think it's going to put Scott in a bit of an awkward position here. As you can see, he's had to promote the Zorua. All of these Zoroarks are going to be getting one shot by Claw Slash next turn if he evolves them. And even the Mew would get one shot because of that Diancie on the bench. So Scott's in a really rough position here. He is going to use that Brooklet to probably get himself a Rockruff. We do see he plays Baby Buzz. That could be a nice sort of another swing card that he maybe decides to use later on. He does expose it immediately, which is interesting because it's not going to be getting value this turn, but perhaps he wants to try and make sure it's on the board. As we see, he's getting rid of that stadium. So maybe he wants to just guarantee that it's on the board for when Scott takes another prize. When Joe takes another prize, Scott can hopefully try and guarantee himself a big sledgehammer attack, which is one of the biggest ways I think Scott could come back in this game after that heavy loss in the early game.
Well, that's an important thing to remember, that Joe could have had the option there to just not use Bloodthirsty Eyes and use Dangerous Rogue to KO the Mew. He would have nexted an extra prize card that way, but very cleverly, obviously, having done that would have immediately triggered the Buzzwole from Scott's side. Of course, Joe doesn't necessarily know that Scott would have played it in his list, but it has been a relatively common inclusion in Zoro like right now. So it's a good assumption to make that that is something that you can fall victim to. And of course, then all that Scott would need to dig for is a strong energy and the choice band, and he wouldn't be getting a KO, but he would be putting a world of hurt into Joe's Lycanroc. So yeah, very wise again using the GX attack there for perhaps an overextension, just KOing something that's a lot more of a threat and enables much less of a comeback from Scott's perspective.
Yeah, definitely. Interesting where he's going to put his energy here. Goes for the Lele. I actually really like this play because it means that there's currently no board state there's not no board state, but on the current board state, Joe won't be taking a knockout on a Lele next turn. He'll be doing 130 with Claw Slash with no other buffs. Now he can definitely get up there. That's pretty much what this deck does. It just has loads of damage modifiers. But for now, it looks like it's the most durable thing in Scott's deck to try and take on this Lycanroc. This is going to be doing at least 80 damage, which is at least a fair chunk, probably for this Buzzwole to finish off later, or maybe even a Zoroark if he's feeling a little bit risky. He does grab the Floatstone from the end as well, so we are going to be seeing a swing from this Lele this turn, and does get himself his first Zoroark, so he can start trading away and hopefully finding some of the answers he needs to deal with this Lycanroc that's applying pressure right now.
Yeah, very good find from Scott, able to get himself both the Floatstone to retreat the Zora and a double colorless to. Well, that was up from the fold in, but getting both of those together and being able to put some damage into the Lycanroc without leaving something out that's just very easily KO'd back by a Claw Slash. And of course now, given that the GX attack has been used, Joe is going to have to dig a little bit here if he wants to reach this KO. It's not impossible, granted, given that the Diancie is on the bench and a strong energy has been attached. Already, Claw Slash is doing 150. If Joe can find a choice band here, that Claw Slash will be able to get a knockout on the top of the GX.
Yeah, and he's doing all the right things. He's managed to find himself a stadium to hopefully start getting rid of, or thinning down his hand a little bit to maybe draw from auxiliary, try and find one of his choice bands. Looking at Joe's list, I believe he only plays 3 choice band. We saw for a while Buzzrocks were playing 4 and 3 Floatstone. Joe's actually trimmed his tool count down for a heavier supporter line. He's actually running 4 Cynthia, 4 Sycamore, 2 N, which is 2 more Draw supporters in general than Buzzrock is used to. So he may have to dig a little bit harder, like you say, just to find this extra damage. And if he doesn't actually find this extra damage, he's going to be in a really interesting spot because Scott actually has the ability to potentially knock this out next turn with Energy Drive. Now Scott's attached that extra energy. The Energy Drive is doing 100. There's already 80, so he just needs to find one more energy or a choice band of his own. And actually, Scott's going to be taking 2 prizes. Of course, as we've mentioned, that does open up Sledgehammer for Baby Buzzwole, and that may not be what he wants to be doing right now. So he may just decide to do the 100 instead and maybe save this Lycanroc for a knockout later on in the game.
One thing to remember is that not only does it trigger the Sledgehammer, but it also does mean that B-String would be online for Joe, so then he could just attach a whole swath of energy and really put Scott on the back foot. But we do see there that Joe does indeed find the choice band, so the point is almost irrelevant. That will be a knockout on the Tapu Lele GX.
That's pretty big. That's another of Scott's very good Pokemon in this matchup to try and deal with Lycanrocs down. And he does indeed also jump over that 4th prize, meaning that Baby Buzzwole will not be getting the big 120 damage Sledgehammer base power attack this game because he's been able to dodge that 4 prize turn, which is another really, really important thing to be able to just try and guarantee you can not get a knockout, not get traded up, not get a knockout from a 1 prize Pokemon in this matchup.
Yeah, very well played from Joe. And now the onus will be back on Scott to think about how he best wants to react here. He can fairly easily dig for a KO on this Lycanroc GX. He would just need a double colorless to put onto the Zoroark and then another Pokemon of some description. He does have an Ultra Ball there, which he's going to probably use find something on the Zoroark, maybe do a couple more trades. But if you can't find a double colorless energy here, then he's in very, very bad shape.
Yeah, definitely. I think this is a pretty rough spot because even if he does manage to knock out this Lycanroc, all that needs to happen is Joe needs to promote a Baby Buzzwole, which is going to be able to swing around, or, well, he needs one more energy to swing around, or he will be on 4 prizes, so he can just Sledgehammer for a base 120 anyway. So I think even no matter what Scott does here to try and knock out this Lycanroc, there is going to be a pretty strong response from Joe, probably taking himself down to 2 or maybe even 1 prizes on the next turn.
Yeah. And off the Ultra Ball, Scott opts to grab his other Tapu Lele GX. You're going to use that to grab himself the Mallow, so he has guaranteed himself the double color energy at this point. He could take a couple of different routes with this. He could grab double colors choice band, that way he can actually get the kill on the Lycanroc with the Tapu Lele. He could grab the double colors and the Zoroark just to draw himself a couple more cards. There's a couple of different avenues he can sort of take, although I actually don't see any choice bands left in his deck, so it looks like he will definitely be grabbing a second Zoroark.
Yeah, looking at Scott's list, he actually plays the 1 choice band, which is slightly rarer for Zoroarks. I believe Zoroarks are more favoured, looking to play 2 bands. So unfortunately, he won't be able to grab that band. You do indeed see him grabbing the Zoroark, like you say, though. So hopefully starting to trade in some answers. But again, it's an interesting spot here. Is there any point in attacking with Lele here? He's just going to go for the concede. I think he's pretty much on the back foot here. It's going to be very difficult for Scott to be able to pull back the game. So we're going to switch over to Joe's side momentarily. It's pretty interesting. We're playing this in a 50-minute best-of-3 format, as you would any sort of standard Swiss tournament. So these players are sort of keeping time in mind, thinking about when they want to scoop. Oh, Joe's here.
Yeah.
Do I have to let him go first, game 2?
Yes.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, standard best-of-3 rules.
Yeah. So we will see Joe and Scott kicking off for game 2. As I was saying, it is standard best-of-3 rules, yeah. So these players are playing with sort of time in mind. So I think Scott made the right play in scooping there. Give himself a lot of time to try and win 2 games in this best-of-3 series. Zoroark is typically a deck that takes a little bit longer to play because it's a bit more of a setup deck. So guaranteeing you have the amount of time you need to try and win 2 games, I think is really, really important. And I think I agree with Scott's decision to try and give this matchup another go and conceding that game 1.
Another important thing to note for those of you guys who are watching at home is that this tournament, we're actually running this in a perhaps a slightly unusual format for a Pokemon tournament. We're running this as a double elimination. So this is a format that you normally tend to see in sort of fighting game tournaments and like, and the way it works is as follows. every single person plays against each other, and there's ends up being two brackets: the winners bracket and losers bracket. If at any point you lose one of your games, you fall into the losers bracket, and if you lose a game in losers brackets, you are knocked out. Hence the name double elimination: 2 losses and you're out. So the two brackets go in parallel until we end up with a final at the end where you have the winner of the losers bracket playing against the winner of the winners bracket. Now, if you are in the winners brackets and then you win that final, you then win the entire thing. But if you're in the losers brackets and you win that final, you then have to win again in order to win the whole tournament, because again, it's double elimination. You only go out of the tournament if you lose twice. It would be unfair for you to go to the losers bracket, win everything, and then only have to win once against the person in the finals to win. So it's a kind of a very different sort of format here, but it means we're going to have a lot more games to show you guys, and you're going to see every single player in the tournament in at least 2 games.
Yeah, definitely. It's going to be really interesting. And it's a format that like you say, isn't really seen in the Pokemon scene, but it is a really, really interesting one to look at. So going into this game, Scott is indeed going first, and he does net himself the Bridget turn 1, which again, like I said, is the most important thing for Zoroark decks on turn 1. You want to guarantee some zeros on the board so you can start trading as much as possible from turn 2. Looks like on Joe's side, we've got a Rockruff start, but we've got a supporter, we've got an energy, we've got, again, pretty much a lot of what Joe wants. He does indeed draw into the Diancie as well, which means he's going to get to Brooklet for an extra Pokemon here, which is super nice.
Yeah, that's super, super nice for him. And,
what do you think you get here?
So right now, Joe has a Rockruff and a Diancie. I think probably a Buzzwole is the best to draw. Either that or a Remoraid. You want to be able to set up your draws as nicely as possible and make sure you have that consistency to last you through the game. But at the same time, there's no really major good attackers that Joe has to power up. So it might sort of depend on what he ends up believing is his best course of action, given that he does have an Ultra Ball, so he can grab the one thing that he's missing from those two anyway. So yeah. I think some combination of those two would be wise. Looks like Remoraid is what he's looking at right now.
Yeah, I think a Remoraid and a Baby Buzz seem to be 2 pretty good picks. Similarly to in Zoroark, I think I want to attach the energy to the Rockruff to try and guarantee a turn 2 Lycanroc, which was what was pretty devastating for Scott last game. I think trying to do something similar will be on Joe's mind. He does indeed ditch the energy, which is interesting.
Well, he's going to
Cynthia.
Yeah, he's going to play Cynthia. I think he's thinking to himself, he plays enough basic energy that ditching one is a lot less impactful than ditching a B-string or ditching a Lycanroc, because of the resources which he has a lot less access to, and he's more more than likely enough, as he has just done, draw another energy anyway.
Yeah, I did also notice that there was a B-string in Joe's hand. There was only one in his deck, so he maybe decided to preserve the B-string instead of ditch it and get the guaranteed energy attachment, because like you say, you have so many basic energy, it's pretty likely you're going to find another one to be able to attach. Doesn't like he's attaching to the Buzzwole, or he's reconsidering. Maybe he wants to have access to Elixir plus energy into Swing Around next turn. Baby Buzzwole can be a bit of an issue for Zoroark to deal with. However, Scott does indeed have Mew, as we saw last game, so maybe potentially he can find a way of dealing with these Buzzwoles early, which maybe is why.
The tricky thing for Joe here is that his ideal attachment this turn is to Rockruff. That's the one thing where if you attach to a Rockruff, it presents the biggest threat in terms of a dangerous road play, and Lycanroc also presents something that the Zoroark Lycanroc deck struggles most to deal with without a Lycanroc of its own. But attaching to the active here means that Scott can very easily deal with the Rockruff with a double colorless evolution, and then just take an easy knockout, and then Joe's essentially achieved nothing. That's why he opted to attach to the Buzzwole instead.
Yeah, definitely. Make sure that if you're losing an energy this turn, you're not also losing your potentially best attacker for the matchup. So it's good to spread your resources around. Joe plays elixirs, so he can still power up a Lycanroc in a turn, provided he finds an elixir before he evolves. So either way, the attachment hopefully will mean that he's able to always present a threat next turn, no matter either it's the Rockruff into a Lycanroc via elixirs and evolutions, or whether it's just the Baby Buzz itself being such a strong attacker against Zoroark decks. Looks like we're seeing Scott trade here. He's managed to get 2 Zoroark, a 3rd Zoroark on the 2nd turn of the game. That's pretty good. You can't ask for much more than that.
That is an insane start from Scott there. Wow, super, super strong. it was going to be able to draw an extra 6 cards every single turn. And as we have seen many a time before, drawing cards wins games.
Yeah, I think Zorak's been one of the biggest cards of this format, and still seems to be, even going into rotation when it loses a lot of its favorite cards, favorite partners in things like Bridget and Puzzle Time. It still seems to be a real strong contender going into next year's format. So
biggest card of this format. I'd say biggest card this entire season. This card has never been bad for very good reason.
It's been good pretty much. It's been released. Yeah, looks like Scott missed out on the Floatstone plus DCE to knock out this Rockruff, which is really unfortunate because it means it would have meant if he'd knocked out this Rockruff, there wasn't any major threat from Lycanroc at least this turn. And if you can maybe prevent the Lycanroc 1 or 2 turns in a row, you can then force them to have to go into sort of Buzzwole mode. And that's when you can start responding with things like Mew EX. But unfortunately for Scott, this Rockruff does stay around. So it does mean this Lycanroc is still kind of a threat. Joe does get an Octillery down. It's really interesting that he actually decided to play his second Remoraid, because Joe's actually only playing a 2-1 Octillery line. So it's interesting he went for the second Remoraid. Hopefully, I would imagine he is maybe expecting Scott to perhaps target this Octillery, so then he can use some recovery and immediately get the Octillery back online if Scott does decide to target this Octillery down.
I'd imagine that's exactly what he has in mind. And it's also interesting to note that given that Joe knows that he has enough attacking power hitting for weakness with the Buzzwoles here, that he doesn't need to get out the GXs, he's very content to just essentially fill his field with single prize attackers. So it's going to be a real slog for Scott to take knockouts here and to take enough to win the game quickly, especially now, with the one exception obviously being Lycanroc GX, but that in and of itself is also a slog for Scott's deck to do. So Joe is only putting out things which Scott can't take easy prizes off of, or at least if their easy prize is only worth 1. So it's a very sort of wise line of play from Joe here.
Yeah, definitely. Like you say, he does grab the Lycanroc to drag up the other Rockruff on Scott's bench, and he does hit the Floatstone plus energy to be able to swing around to take off this energy from Scott's board. Again, a really unfortunate board state for Scott to be in, but this is a board state that Mew EX can respond to. And also, if he does that, it does mean that B-String nor Sledgehammer will be online, and it will take all of Joe's energy off the board. So maybe if he can find a Mew EX knockout this turn, that could swing the game a little bit back into Scott's favour, hopefully being able to start establishing a Lycanroc of his own, which I think is one of the keys to this matchup.
Yeah, that would be the ideal sort of response from him. But even then, again, it's nowhere near as impactful as it would have been had Joe decided to do the same line of play, but with a Buzzwole GX, for example, because then Scott takes 2 prizes and he's able to get right back in it very easily. Even at Scott's most ideal turn here, he's still only taking 1 prize. So, you know, that's, I guess in a sense it all is two-sided, because like you said, that does mean that Joe won't have a Sledgehammer or B-String online, but it does mean that Scott makes less progress towards, you know, being able to take that win.
Yeah, definitely. If he doesn't, the other thing is if he does indeed take the 1 prize, like you said, because of the current state of Joe's board, it's going to be really difficult for Scott to miss out that 4 prize turn, because Joe is definitely not thinking about benching this Buzzwole whilst there's the potential threat of a Mew EX about, because it's just going to mean that Joe isn't able to use Sledgehammer, which is such a strong attack. So it's going to mean Scott would have to look at trying to deal with this Lycanroc if he wants to miss that turn. And if he's looking at dealing with the Lycanroc, that's probably one of the most difficult things on this board to deal with currently. We do see the Mew EX come down from Scott and the Floatstone in the active, so all he needs now is a DC to be able to respond on this Buzzwole. Looks like we're seeing a parallel from Scott's side as well. Decides to get rid of the Lycanroc. I think that's a fairly safe bet. It's the 2 prize Pokemon as mentioned. It could be another reason why Joe decided to grab the second Remoraid as well, to guarantee you have a good discard with parallel and to technically thin it out of your deck. If you thin it out of your deck and discard it, it means you're not going to be drawing into it later on. And Joe is a pretty religious player when it comes to this deck. He does not like how the deck draws. That's why he's upped the support account. He wants to have more consistency. So not drawing into a dead card in a late game is potentially something Joe wants to try and make sure he can avoid.
Yeah, really, really huge miss there for Scott, as he does not actually get double colours. He has the Mew, but he was just forced to pass, and Joe drawing into the Guzma, and he's not going to be able to deal with this Rock Rush straight away just by doing Sledgehammer for 70 damage. This is really, really bad news for Scott.
Yeah, this is pretty rough. It does, however, mean Joe is on 4 prizes, so Scott's own Baby Buzzwole will be active. Small victories, that is one way that this can be responded on, especially if he can find himself a Guzma, if he can respond on the one on the bench. Again, Joe perhaps won't have a particularly good answer to be able to one-shot the Buzzwole in return. And maybe we can see a board state where Scott's Buzzwole gets to take 2 prizes just through Sledgehammer, because Joe currently doesn't have a fantastic way of being able to knock out an attacking Baby Buzzwole.
No, he does. No, he does not. He would have to rely on getting a couple of. He could attach the strong or the beast energy, and then with the anti swing around, it might be enough. But
yeah, with if he attaches the beast and hits the elixir, that is enough to one-shot the Buzzwole after that draw of the beast energy from the prizes. So we'll have to see whether Scott decides to attack with the Baby Buzzwole. He could still decide to attack with the Mew EX as well, but again, he's in a pretty similar spot if Joe is able to hit the elixir, and in that case, Joe's taking 2 prizes instead of 1, which at this point he just wants to accelerate his board state and accelerate his win condition. So I think it would be a little bit riskier attacking with the Mew EX as opposed to the Baby Buzzwole.
Yeah, and so Scott has just played the Mallow. Of course, given that we're looking at this game from Joe's side, we don't have a view of what exactly he got off that, but there is the Buzzwole, and I imagine we'll be seeing I was going to say a energy get attached to that, but we do see there the Puzzle of Time. So Scott, I imagine, going to be playing 2 of those at the same time and grab any 2 cards they want from a discard pile.
Yeah, probably get himself one of those energy, and maybe something like a Guzma or an N, a draw supporter. Maybe he's thinking about, once I've taken out this Baby Buzz, perhaps knocking out the Octillery on the bench. Gets himself a Mallow. That opens up his options for next turn. He has 3 Zoroarks out, which is still a really, really big, important part of the Zoroark deck. It's just being able to draw through your cards and draw through your deck, and find answers. He does indeed get the Sledgehammer attack, knocking out this Baby Buzzwole, and we're seeing the first prize on Scott's side of this game. However, as we can see, Scott has a pretty good hand. Joe has a pretty good hand, to just respond on this one Baby Buzzwole.
He does. Now, here's the awkward thing for Joe. He could guarantee himself the KO by just attaching this beast energy, because of course that would boost swing around to 110, and then with the anti that'd be 130, so that would be enough for the knockout, even if he flips double tails on it. But then he's attached 4 energy to a Buzzwole, and that just doesn't really seem ideal, and you can tell he's agonizing a bit over the decision now.
It's his only attacker as well, so going all in on his only attacker, especially when there's a Mew EX on the board, that probably will be, now we know Scott has a Mallow, we'll probably see this Mew EX knocking out the Baby Buzzwole in response next turn. So he may be slightly reluctant to attach his extra energy just to guarantee 1 prize. It just depends on whether he decides to flip some coins or not. He's got all 3 of his draw supporters in hand as well, so he's got plenty of options draw-wise. He's thinking about attaching a Strong. The Strong pushes his damage to 120. That's sort of the medium option. It means he only needs 1 heads. So we'll have to see.
He does find himself another Buzzwole, so that's going to get bench straight away. And of course, he's not used Abyssal Hand yet this turn, so he needs that to draw a couple more cards. If he found a Max Elixir off of that would be ideal for him. Oh, he finds a Beast Ring.
Beast Ring is a really, really strong card, considering that Scott's probably going to be wanting to knock out this Baby Buzzwole that's going to be attacking him this turn. That's going to activate Joe's Beast Rings, and all of a sudden, Scott is going to have access to another attacker. We probably need to see, from Scott's side, maybe a DCE plus an N to try and stop that from happening. Not that he knows that Joe has a Beast Ring in hand. He probably just has to see if he can N it out of him anyway.
Yeah, and it looks like the middle option does indeed work out for Joe, as he does hit that 1 out of 2 heads needed to do 140 damage and KO the Buzzwole. So action now back on Scott as we see how he thinks the best way to respond to this might be.
Yeah, he does indeed find the DC for the Mew. As we've said, though, there is going to be a pretty strong B-string turn from Joe here. If Scott does not end him. I don't think Scott has any particular reason to end him. But that being said, he didn't have to Mallow to find the DC this turn, so maybe he's going to look at ending him just to try and lower his hand size anyway. Of course, Joe does have Abyssal Hand, but even just starting at a 3-card hand is still important. And he does indeed use the N. So we are going to see Joe lose that B string. We'll see whether he draws another one. He does draw back into it and an energy this time. So we are going to be seeing a swing around next turn.
Yeah, obviously that's arguably a better hand he just drew there. That's
a choice band as well. That means he's already guaranteed this knockout on the Mew with the Diancie plus choice band. Swing around will be doing a base of 130 damage before flipping any coins. And then just to top it all off, Joe can indeed Abyssal Hand for 5 cards, potentially depending on his top deck, which is obviously another nice reload.
My goodness, I don't think Joe could have asked for a more ideal 3 cards after that end there. And Scott's probably going to see these 3 get dropped right now, and he's not going to be a very happy man.
No, it's going to push Joe down to 1 prize, while Scott still has 4. And Joe still has only 1 prize attackers on his board right now, so it's going to be very, very difficult for, I think, Scott to take 4 individual prizes before Joe is able to take just 1 more.
Yeah, absolutely. I'm really struggling to see a comeback method for Scott here, given that, like we were saying closer to the start of the game, it was just such a slog for Scott to take the prizes he needs to actually go for the win. And why is Joe not attaching the energy?
Just not attaching. I wonder why. I assume he was looking for a strong. Maybe he wants to attack with a Buzzwole GX, but attacking with a Buzzwole GX feels very, very scary.
Yeah, it does, and it's like you're saying, he's got the knockout guaranteed regardless. So he didn't.
I think our maths is correct. Yeah, our maths is correct. He's actually attaching straight to the Buzzwole. Oh, okay. Scott can. Joe can just
do Sledgehammer. Okay.
Of course. Okay, so this way he sets up 2 attackers. It's still super sketchy, or not sketchy, but super risky. Joe benching this Buzzwole GX, considering he had a full non-EX board state, there was no way Scott was going to be able to get out of B-string range. So it was interesting that he decided to still play this Buzzwole plus B-string this turn.
No, actually, this is absolutely correct, because now all that means is that even if, no matter what Scott KOs, all he needs is an energy and he has an attacker ready to take the last prize, because
that's very true,
he's so far ahead in prizes right now that it doesn't matter if something gets KO'd. He just needs another to announce another KO-inducing attack. So that's absolutely fine mentioning the Buzzwole at this point. It's no longer a risk.
Hopefully Scott can find himself a way out of here, but it's looking pretty set in stone with Joe's current hand size. If Scott were to N, Joe still has the Abyssal Hand to be able to draw into an answer. I did notice there are only, I think, 2 or 3 energy left in Joe's deck, so maybe that's something that Joe or Scott has to wish for. He has to hopefully find an N plus then some good luck on his side to try and prevent Joe from finding one of his last energy. I'm pretty sure Joe still has. Joe plays 2 super odds, and I'm pretty sure we haven't seen either of them yet. So there's probably still a huge amount of outs for Joe anyway. This is looking pretty set in stone, but at the end of the day, this could be...
I think it's guaranteed at this point, because Scott just played a Mallow, so Joe's hand is staying as it is. All he needs to do is attach an energy and announce Knuckle Impact and KO anything on Scott's side of the field.
Yeah, there is nothing that lives a Knuckle Impact. So it's looking, unless there's anything missing, I'm pretty sure this is game, set, and match for this matchup. It's been a really, really interesting game, though.
Yeah, it has. The one way which Joe doesn't win immediately is if he attaches the fighting instead of the strong, and Scott leaves the tap related and active. Oh no, not even that, because there's a Diancie there, so there's actually no way. Joe cannot mess this up if he tries.
So it looks like Scott did find himself double puzzle to, and the Lycanroc to take out this Buzzwole GX. As we've seen, it doesn't matter because Joe has an energy anyway. But this, if Joe didn't have the energy, this pretty much would be the ideal turn, I think. Just taking out 2 more prizes, getting out of B-string range, and being able to take out one of the attackers. Unfortunately, we've seen that it's not going to be able to come to fruition. But I think Scott did everything he could in his power to try and win back this game.
Yeah.
Unfortunately, Joe was able to find that last energy for the final swing around KO.
Well, it did have to be the strong energy for the guarantee as well. Otherwise, we would have had to rely on flips potentially. Because
Flipping some coins.
yeah, but no flip coin flips needed. The strong energy will guarantee it. It means that he doesn't necessarily fall victim to an evil double tails. There's a swing around. And Joe will be taking the first match in the Sneak Attack Invitational, and Scott will be our first victim to fall into the losers bracket.
Yes. So a really, really interesting match. Thank you very much for watching, everyone. It's been a really, really interesting matchup. There's some really, really cool decks. So make sure you stay tuned to the Sneak Attack Invitational. There's going to be some fun to watch. And cheers for watching, everyone.